Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. I hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the table from me, Rabah? Is it Rabah or Rabah?
Rabah.
Rabah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I got to say it twice so people remember.
Yeah, it's like Robert, but
okay.
I had to think of a little mind tick to help
You
people.
look like a Robert.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like Bob the Barber?
Yeah,
I think you guys could pass as brothers.
Possibly, yeah. Bob's a little better looking. Bob has a mustache game like yours. My mustache game's a little weak.
It is not weak, that's for sure.
It could be stronger.
Triple whale.
Yes, sir.
What is triple whale?
So Triple Whale, we are dubbing it as the e-commerce OS. So ultimately, we want people to think of, when you think of starting an e-commerce store, you start a Shopify store. And when you want to be a profitable e-commerce store, you install Triple Whale. And so we pull in all of your ads data. You have a profit tracker, so all your COGS will come in. Yeah, all the awesomeness, so you can see exactly what's going on. We now have an affluencer hub. So if you run a lot of influencer stuff, you can track all that. And we have a creative cockpit. So if you want to do any sort of creative analysis, it's all in there. So
Wait. Creative cockpit. Tell me more about that. How does that work? Like, how do you do the analysis of it?
Yeah, so we pull in basically all of your creatives. We have Facebook and TikTok now. YouTube is coming soon. Shout out. I saw the placards in the beard shop. There's a platinum one in there for you folks that don't know about it. Oh, gold.
Not quite platinum.
There's commas in that, so okay.
Yeah, a million.
Sorry.
So not 10 million yet.
Oh my gosh, this guy. Look at him. Just a humble pie over here. The Creative Cockpit, yeah, it's amazing. So we pull in all your data, and then so we have the triple pixel. So that is our solution to the 14.5 debacle where Apple decided just to cut everybody's dick in terms of just attribution is just chaos now. And so that is all integrated into the Creative Cockpit. And so you can use in-platform metrics as well as the pixel. We have thumb stop ratio. So if you're into like pattern interrupt and stuff like that. And then we have all your creatives. And then what's really cool is we have a time series where it's a double axis. And then you can actually see what's going on in terms of either ROAS or spend or whatever metrics you care about. And then you can even go further if you run, say, prospecting, or say you're running different angles on your beard ads for, say, like this is for growth, this is for looking better, this is for sheen, whatever the angles are, you can segment those angles and see what creatives are working. I mean, all of it is run off of just your naming convention. So you can do a really quick, easy analysis and understand what creatives are working, so you can scale to the moon the ones that are and sunset the ones that aren't.
So it's more of kind of analyzing the metrics and performance behind the creative.
Yeah. So it's basically pulling in all the data that you would care about and then putting it into a UI that doesn't suck, and then giving you... So I guess the too long didn't read is at Triple Whale, we're not data for data's sake. We're data to analyze, and then that analysis elicits actions that then further business metrics. And so basically it kind of does that for you. The real show that we're trying to get to is where we layer on some AI, where we can actually start to tell you what creatives will perform better. We're not there yet. So right now you still have to use that gray matter to understand which is doing what. But yeah, you can use whatever leading indicators you want. We also have the lagging indicators in there as well. So yeah, it's been a pretty big hit. You don't have to use it, but you can. It's an add-on. So we have the core Triple Whale OS. And then you can kind of build your bespoke package to understand what's going to generate the most value for you. So we want to make sure that there's a nice on-ramp for people that don't have necessarily the economics to make sense for. It can get pretty pricey once you have the whole bundle, but value for value kind of thing.
Man, you talked about AI, and I was actually thinking about that when you talked about like this creative section where like I could upload a photograph and you'd be like, well, we have a 20% confidence that this is going to be thumb stopping. And then just like trying to get that number higher by just throwing in different creative. That's the vision for where you guys are.
That's ultimately the vision. And then ultimately we have something right now where we are working on, it's a working name. It's not at all an external name, but like the God metric, where there's this, we have a crazy AI team out of Russia that is just doing some incredible work. And ultimately, AI is just fancy math at the end of the day. And so what we're doing is looking at, once you have 5 or more touch points, is the traffic you're bringing going to convert within 2 weeks? And then how much is it costing you? And so we're showing you on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being like, this traffic's terrible, will never convert, it's costing you a lot of money, and 10, this is super cheap traffic that's going to convert. And we have right now 93% confidence that this metric is correct, but like the math is so good that we're like quadruple checking our work because it's too good to be true right now. But if we can crack that, that'll be really cool, because ultimately then we just abstract away attribution and you just run your paid media and you have this kind of, again, working name God metric of like, okay, cool, what am I at? Am I over a 7 or 8? And you can kind of reference that to your business goals. And I know that metric needs to be at a certain threshold. And if it's at that threshold, keep spending. And if it goes back below that threshold, then you need to either change creative, lower spend, what have you. That's kind of our big vision with AI, is ultimately abstracting away attribution, where it kind of seems weird, but at the same time, a little bit of the Apple mentality, right? Of like cannibalizing our own product, where attribution is a big product for us. But we think that it's going to be really interesting if we can do that, because again, all this data analysis is really fancy and awesome and epic. But at the end of the day, we just want to empower business owners to make more money, generate more profits, and help their families. And so if you don't have to do this analysis and you can just put money in the machine and the machine tells you if you're doing good or bad, that's kind of the end game for us with our AI.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, a lot of our listeners are tend to be on the, small relative to the Fortune 500s, kind of 6-7 figure businesses. And I feel like, the messaging we hear as entrepreneurs is like, the only way to grow your business is paid social, paid ads. And obviously that's not true. Like, there's
totally with you.
A million different ways to build a business. But it is probably true that most businesses that have achieved any kind of scale have successful paid strategies behind them. And, I think one of my challenges has just always been attribution.
Yeah.
And everyone taking credit for every sale. So, historically, I would spend, let's say I spend $10,000, and then of that $10,000, Google says they're driving 20,000, Facebook says they're driving 20,000. Instagram says they're doing 20,000. I should have 60,000, but it turns out I only have like 15,000. Yes. And it's like, what's going on here? Like, I have lower revenue. So like, you lose faith in the process. And I want to talk about the triple whale pixel.
Yeah.
And like, how, like, explain it like I'm an idiot, because I am. And, there's some very new entrepreneurs who aren't idiots, but they've never experienced it before. Talk about like, what does this pixel do? Like, how does it become a first party pixel versus a third party pixel?
Yeah. So first off, great question. Amazing tee up. Ultimately, what happened with 14.5, the iOS update, is Apple realized that privacy could start to become a product differentiator. And so what they said, you can think of attribution almost like a camera system. And so Google has their own camera system, Facebook has their own camera system, TikTok, Snapchat, all these people have their own camera system. One of the issues with separate camera systems is what you were talking about, is that duplication of credit. And so you have 10 sales in Shopify, but then you add up all your in-platform metrics and you have 30 sales. And so it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense, because Shopify is, at the end of the day, the central source of truth, right? How much money is going to my bank account? That's what I care about. So what happened is there's a lot of basically legal loopholes where if you're a first party pixel, you don't get blocked. And so without getting super, super technical, third party, the way a Facebook pixel works, or TikTok or what have you, is Facebook is using everybody's data to make your data better, but it's also going to use your data to make everybody else's data better. Hence, it's third party. And so, for example, like with Beard Brand, right? If somebody comes and are interested in beard care products and they come to another beard care store and they don't buy because they don't like it, because it sucks, because it's not Beard Brand, Facebook is then going to show that person Beard Brand ads because it knows they're looking for XYZ category. And then now they're going to show that. So it's almost like a neural network, if you will. Whereas the first party pixel is siloed. So you only get that data. You can only use that data. So there's some pros and cons to that. The cons, we'll start with that, is you can't spin up. Well, depending on how big your business is, the volume of purchases, when you start with a blank slate. Whereas on a third party pixel, like a Facebook pixel, it's basically ready to go right off the bat because it's using everybody else that's like you to kind of target. With us, you're essentially renting a first-party pixel infrastructure from us. And so instead of having to build your own, do your own stuff, code all your stuff, you're basically just renting this infrastructure from us and then being able to attribute to it. And so with that, you can then get around these loopholes where Facebook can't track. Well, technically they are tracking you, but because they don't want to have WhatsApp kicked off, Facebook, Messenger, all these things kick off the App Store, they have to, analogy I like to use is like money laundering. So it's like data laundering. So they actually have the data, but they can't give it to you because of legal ramifications. So what they do is they launder it through AEM, it's aggregated event measurement. And so they put this data through this money launderer where they can kind of massage it enough and anonymize it enough.
Data launderer.
Yeah, data launderer. Exactly. Yeah, it literally is. And so what happens when you launder stuff is that if I'm coming to you, Eric, and I say, hey, I have all this money, but I need to get it actually cleaned. What do you go? Okay, cool. I'll clean it for you for 30 points or something. So every dollar that I give you, you're going to give me 70 cents in something. And so that's very analogous to what Facebook's doing, where they're essentially modeling what's happening. And so you're not getting the actual high fidelity data. Furthermore, there's a lag where there's 2 to 3 days where it takes for them to actually perform that modeling to then get that data. So if you're scaling to the moon like Beard Brand and say you're spending 20, 30K a day on Facebook, you can't wait 2 or 3 days to understand what's happening. Furthermore, when you do get that data, it's not high fidelity. It's a modeled version of what actually happened. It's not the actual truth. And so, anyway, too long didn't read. Essentially, you're renting the first-party infrastructure from us. When you're first-party data, you own essentially all the data, so you can do whatever you want with it. When you're in a third-party data, you have to adhere to these 14.5 rules where you're not allowed to show it, you have to anonymize it, you have to model it, you have to do all these things that makes the fidelity and everything worse. And then furthermore, when you use a triple pixel, all the camera systems that I was talking about are linked up. So you don't run into those deduplication problems that you do when you have Facebook, Google, TikTok, what have you, because Facebook has no clue what Google's doing. Google has no clue what TikTok's doing. And it's not on them. It's just they're technically totally siloed from each other. Whereas now with the triple pixel, you have one cohesive surveillance system. That's probably a terrible word to use. Camera system that shows you the actual truth of what's happening. And ultimately, attribution is always going to be like an asymptote. It's never going to be perfect. Like you're going to tell your friend, they're going to tell your friend, and then they're going to buy Beard Brand. It's like, how do you attribute that? You're not. And so the way we like to think of attribution is it gives you the story to then make business decisions off of. And that story is the most accurate to the truth, but it might not be 100%. And it also gets around being able to give you real-time data as well as the highest fidelity data, because we don't model the data. We give you actually what's happening. So that's kind of a little bit in the weeds explanation, but there's a lot more going on there. But that's ultimately where it is. There's legal loopholes that we're getting around. You're renting first-party infrastructure so you can spin it up without having to incur all these incredible development costs, etc. And you're getting a real-time, high-fidelity version of the story of how you actually converted that person.
So another question I have is like, is the triple pixel only effective if you're using UTM codes?
No, but it is the most effective, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
So it's, can I use gun analogies on here?
I mean, we're in Texas, right?
Let's go, baby. So like a gun is more effective with a scope or a sight or what have you. And so that's kind of where UTMs come in, where we're doing some really fancy stuff with cookies, server-side stuff, all this fancy stuff, but the UTMs will really help increase that fidelity. So we 100% recommend people using UTMs. And what's really cool, we actually have it coming out pretty soon, is we're moving away from like source, medium, like all the GA, OG UTMs. And we're going to give you just actually triple whale specific UTMs that you can just append. So we won't mess up your GA reporting. We won't mess up, like if you're using some other weird UTM structure that you really need, some schema that's really important to you, you can just actually amend these triple pixel attributes to your UTMs and use whatever structure you want. And as long as you have kind of the secret sauce appended to it, we'll know what to do with the person.
I feel like, one of my challenges as someone who's not running the ads, but working with people who run the ads and working with different agencies is managing them to keep the UTMs consistent.
100%.
Like someone does CPC, someone does PPC, someone does paid, someone does capital P paid. Like, is that an ongoing problem? Is there a way to like categorize?
Huge issue. So we try and do some smart stuff there. But again, we actually have something we just got approved by Facebook. And so we're going to be, if you opt into it, will actually auto append the UTMs for you. So you won't run into that. So you can say, yes, we want you to add the UTMs to all my ads, and then we'll do everything for you. Right now you have to manually do it, and it's like, just candidly, a quagmire. There's just a lot of people that, to your point, they're just
well,
trying.
If you have human input, you're going to have errors.
Yeah. And just to your, like, so a lot of our clients are in that kind of $1 to $50 million run rate. And these people are just trying to make money. They don't care what a urchin tracking module is. Who gives a fuck? Like, just, I want to make money. What do I got to do? And so being able to, again, take those steps and get out of their way so they can just sell what they're selling and make money and help their family is really the end game. And so the UTM injection is going to be, I think, a big game changer for us, because that's the number one. Like, our CS team is just inundated with that. And to your point, with human input, there's always going to be, like you just said, casing, misspellings, fat fingering the keyboard, what have you. And those UTMs can get kind of gnarly. And so it's really hard to just kind of spot check them. So yeah, it's a very good point.
Now, Triple Whale has like a dashboard too, where you go in and I can see all of Facebook metrics. I can see all of Google's metrics. And then also there's the triple pixel metric too that you're able to set up.
Yep.
How, I think, like, in my opinion, the best way to grow through paid is by focusing almost entirely on new customer acquisition.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I feel like in working with agencies over the past 10 years, the gentle suggestion is always like, hey, let's use ads to target current customers. And then you end up paying them to hand
people an ad while they're already walking to the checkout.
Yeah. Or even if they're not, like, even if the ad does help with the sales, like, you're not really growing that way either. Like, so like took me way too long to figure this out, is like, if you're doing paid acquisition, like, the metrics that you're looking at need to be entirely focused on new customer acquisition.
That is personally my philosophy, and that's what we see on our biggest scaling accounts. Like, not to be too highfalutin, but the fancy term is we want incremental conversions, right? Like, this person is bringing a new person into the fold that would have never bought, that now bought. Where we want other people, like, paid media is really expensive, and it should, in my opinion, only be used on high margin products that are bringing in incremental conversions. Like, not to say that you can't sell low margin products, not to say that you shouldn't promote other products, but there's a certain profile that needs to be hit with a product that, again, high margin, best selling, great experience that people are going to love and that haven't bought in the past. So I couldn't agree with you more. I'm in that 80% prospecting, 20% retargeting, or even as aggressive as 90 to 10, or even if you don't have the economics. Like, when I was running my agency, I had 2 clients that I didn't run any retargeting for because the economics just didn't work. Like, we wanted to bring new people into the fold, and kind of just taking it up a notch, or like a higher level view, is I think of marketing as an ecosystem, and people, like, I think got too addicted. Like, it happens in bull markets, right? Where Facebook inventory was so underpriced and the targeting was so good that you could just put money, $1 in, and $5 would pop out of this machine. So you're just like, let's put more money in. And I think that bred I don't want to say complacent, but there was just a reward for people that were really charismatic, but weren't really good at their job, quite frankly. And so there was all these agencies that could just talk you up and blah, blah, blah. And this was great. And it's fine, because the old line is everybody's a genius in a bull market, or looks like a genius in a bull market. And that's exactly what happened, in my opinion. Now you're seeing this kind of really big pendulum swing back to profitability, back to incremental conversions, back to how am I bringing new customers into the fold. And at the end of the day, you want to use paid media to augment your marketing ecosystem. I think of it as a fuel on a fire, right? So if you have a great foundation in terms of community, in terms of branding, in terms of email, in terms of organic reach, like, all these things build this foundation that you can then build a house on. But if you just try and grow through paid, it's going to be a long road, and it's going to be really expensive. And quite frankly, like, at the end of the day, the economics just won't net out, because paid media can never compound. Like, you might at the beginning, if you've never run ads or something like that, have this exponential growth, but you'll eventually the slope will go back to 1, where you'll just be this linear growth, whereas content can compound, community can compound, all these other things can compound. You can hit exponential podcasting. All these other things can start to compound because more and more people start to get on the boat, versus paid media, again, is always going to be just a linear growth mechanism. And so as people, especially if you don't have like a bunch of VC backed money where you're just going growth at all costs and you need to be profitable, like a lot of our clients as well, where they're bootstrapped and they're just trying to make things work, paid media needs to be a scalpel rather than a broadsword. And I think a lot of people have used it as the latter versus the former.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of things that I just want to echo because I agree with them so much. Like email and your SMS, that's your middle of funnel. That's a lot less expensive to acquire sales from that. Organic, you can't sleep on organic. That's 100%. YouTube, podcasts, blogging, just being a shit talker on Twitter, 100%. Seems to work pretty well.
No, it's true.
And then, it's funny because I have a good friend who he just does paid, and he knows what he got into. Like he's not crying to sleep or anything, but his if he turns off ads on Facebook, his business is getting literally zero sales. Yeah. Nothing's coming in. And then when he turns it on, he had, a upper 7-figure business when it was all hitting. Yeah. But then, 14.5 comes out, completely changes the margins, changes the game. And to be so dependent on one platform, I don't know how you sleep well at night, doing that.
It ain't the path. So what we've seen, we'll kind of brighten up the picture here. You can still succeed in this market, but what we've seen our biggest clients and people still growing in this market are 3 things. One, you just touched on, diversification of spend. We've seen people spending on TikTok. We've seen people really lean into micro influencers as well, where I think one suggestion would be paid media is more than advertising. It's asset allocation. How can you spend money to get the most incremental lift for your business? If that's buying billboards, effing buy billboards. If that's newspaper ads, buy newspaper ads. I think there's this dogma of Facebook's the only way to grow. It's that's not true. Figure out the best way. Maybe it is Facebook, but maybe it's not. And so being able to diversify your spend so you're not on the teat of Facebook or one channel per se, because I have friends the same way, but they're on Google, and if they turn off any of their Google, they're dead. And it's dude, man, it's a brutal way to live, because any algorithm changes, or if the inventory starts getting crazy where they have less uses on the platform, that means less inventory. If there's less inventory, that means the ads are going to be more expensive. There's all these things that you really can't control. So diversification of spend, this is going to sound super cheesy, but you guys do it really well, is community. Community is such a big lever for growth, such a big lever for retention, such a big lever for product development. Start investing in your community. The way I try and tell people is, if you don't have a church for people to evangelize at, you're doing it wrong. You need some place to have your people that really love your product be able to scream and congregate at. So figure out where your church is, whether that's a Facebook group, whether it's a Slack channel, whether it's a WhatsApp, whatever it is. WhatsApp's probably not a great play, but Discord, exactly. Yeah, it's a better example.
We do private forums. We
Beautiful.
Use Discourse.
100%. Yeah. And so those are kind of the things that diversifying spend, the communities, and then lastly, foundational economics. So there's a saying in fitness, you can't out-train a bad diet. I believe the same thing holds for marketing, where you can't outbuy bad economics. And so you just need to make sure that your margins are there, your profitability is there. If it's not, figure out how to change the game. If you don't play games, you can't win. So maybe you can get better rates from your shipping supplier. Maybe your pick and pack is too expensive. Figure that out. And this gets into almost product development. It's your sales cycle's too long. Okay, cool. Make the product smaller. Or figure ways out to change your business economics if they're not working, or use different strategies that are more conducive to your business model and your business economics. And so that's what we've seen is people that have really strong foundational economics, a really strong community, and more diversification of spend have been scaling to the moon. They've been crushing it right now. And so it's kind of that, depending on what your viewpoints are, it's a bit of creative destruction where a lot of drop shippers are getting wrecked. A lot of people that don't have communities, are channel dependent, like you've said, and have just quite frankly horrible economics, are just getting wrecked right now.
So you mean you just gotta have a good business?
But
you can't make it on shit businesses anymore.
Yeah, anymore is I think the key point, because you could for a little while.
There was drop shippers printing like Alibaba.
Money. Exactly, and I don't think that's the case anymore. Where it's really challenging to do that now, just because all the arbitrage and the paid media game has shrunk, where there's just not a lot more. But again, those businesses that are doing those things correctly, to your point, a quote unquote good business, they're still flourishing.
I want to talk about how this is a reminder. Hopefully I've talked about it on other shows, but business is a journey, and the way you win is by figuring out how to enjoy the journey.
I love that.
The way you lose is by figuring out how to exit, or have this big payoff, or hit these certain milestones that aren't really in your control. So the more you can focus on, what am I doing that I really enjoy, so I can grind on this for 5 years or 10 years and build things that don't have payoff. Like the YouTube channel, our community, they legitimately cost more to make than you make.
Yeah.
Especially in the early days.
Yeah.
But as you grow it and scale it, then they become profitable. And
Exactly.
you kind of, most people aren't willing to, blog for, hell, they're not even willing to blog for a month.
Couldn't agree with you more. And this goes back to, and not to keep hammering that horse, but that linear growth versus compounding growth. Like, for example, like at Triple Well, when I first started, so the first two things I started was our newsletter and our podcast and content. And like, you're just screaming into the ether for the first few months, right? Like nobody's liking it. Nobody, like, there's like this tiny, and then finally something catches and something catches. And so I agree with you. And I think it's really helpful, and not only just in business, but in life, to really concentrate on leading indicators that you can control versus the lagging indicators. So what I mean by that is a lagging indicator, like, I want to have X amount of views on my YouTube channel, or I want Y amount of subscribers, or I want this amount of web traffic or whatever. You have no fucking control over that. But what you can control is, can I post every Tuesday, Thursday? Can I do a YouTube video every Friday? Can I do these things that, like, they're check boxes versus actual metrics? And just do that. And to your point, it makes it really easy when you enjoy it, because you're having fun and you're doing it. And like, ultimately, it'll either compound, or there's a certain point where it's like, hey, maybe this wasn't the right bet. Let's take it behind the shed and, do what needs to be done. So I'm not saying you need to be totally committed all the time when you don't want to put good money behind bad, but I agree with you. I think I've seen so many people non-committal, and then they're like, oh, my first podcast didn't blow up. Oh my God, I'm such a failure. Like, well, what did you expect? Like, Rogan was what, like 100, 200, 300 podcasts in, and it was kind of like a nothing burger for a little while, and then it just started exploding. Now he's just printing money from Spotify, just living the life. And so I think you just hit on so many things there, where you really want to find something you're really into. You don't want to be really indexing on these lagging indicators or these quote unquote success metrics. It sounds so cheesy, but just do the work, and then you figure it out. And you definitely want checkpoints, right? Like, you need to make sure that, like, hey, things are trending in the right direction, or you're pushing things forward. But at the same time, like, you can't do that so early on that you're gonna kind of snuff the fire out before it can become an inferno.
Yeah. Inputs, not outputs.
That's way more succinctly put. Exactly.
Do you get any kind of inside scoop into actual creative? Like, is it user-generated content? Is that what we should be? Should we, like, there was a thread on a private community I'm in, and they're talking about you can buy business cameos now.
Yeah.
So I could get like Mr. Wonderful to say, the biggest deal I ever passed on was Beard Brand. You should check him out. Yeah. I could pay him to say that for me now.
I was thinking about that for the Trace Kama guy. For him.
Yeah, because he's on Cameo.
He's on Cameo too, yeah. The short answer is yes. The long answer is do what's best for your business. And so there's definitely trends that you can ride, but you want to figure out what is going to drive the most for your business. So we did see this big boon of UGC content driving a lot of things for people, but it's kind of like I call it the Waze effect. Do you ever use Waze for traffic?
No.
Okay, so Waze is like this little like crowdsourced app that you can use for getting directions, and people can like do this and they track you for traffic and all this stuff. But what happens is there's like a detour that's faster than the actual main route, because the main route's clogged up with a wreck or whatever. But then so many people that are using Waze start to take the detours, and then the detour becomes clogged up. And so that's kind of how creative trends can get, where UGC was really, really powerful, really, really effective for a little while. But what's happening now is people are getting almost like format fatigue of like everything's a UGC ad now. And so the pendulum's kind of swinging back to a little bit more polished, professional
really?
Ads. Yeah, that's what we're seeing. And so, and again, do what your ad account likes. Like, that's kind of my number one rule, where it's like, figure out what your ad account likes and do that, where there isn't really these kind of like formulaic, like do X, Y, and Z, because every business, every audience, everything is going to be a little bit different. Like, you might be able to piggyback in terms of verticals are probably a little bit easier to replicate, where it's like X vertical is doing Y, let's just do more of Y. That's not a horrible strategy, but in terms of creative, we've seen a bit of a swing back to more professional style videos than the UGC. But to be fair, UGC was crushing it for a really long time. So I would definitely try it. But I think people are getting a little bit of fatigue, where they see the UGC and think of an ad.
Yeah.
And they see like a professional video and like don't think of an ad as much. It's a weird kind of inversion of psychology, if that makes sense, just because of the repetition of everybody, that Waze effect. Everybody jumped on this detour now, and everything you see in a sponsored ad is actually a UGC. And so people are like, okay, they think of it as an ad. So anyways, too long didn't read. We do sit a lot of, so we're like 5,000 stores, 12 billion in GMV, 2.3 billion in ad spend track. So we're sitting across a huge data set, but it's hard to derive those trends because you get into almost like averages, and averages in big data sets can be kind of misleading because it's going to work for some people. And then people are going to come yell at me after the podcast. Like, I put $20,000 into UGC, you fuck, and nothing works now.
I mean, I think, in my opinion, the strategy is, what is the system to create and test content?
That's it. Damn it, you're taking all my answers. This guy, he's done it before, hasn't he?
You should have me on your podcast.
Yeah, come on anytime. We have a studio, not as nice as this, but that, in my opinion, is way better. And it's also kind of going back to the other axiom that you put way better than I did, was inputs versus outputs. If you can build a system around creative testing, that is honestly the number one thing I would put all my resources towards. That is so crucial. And the people that are spending 50, 60K a day on their channels, all of them have almost like just this well-oiled machine of like, here, I get the creatives on X day, we test them on Y day, we analyze them on Z day, and then we just rinse and repeat and run it over and over. And that also insulates you from being dependent on those trends.
Yeah,
where you're just
fatigue.
Exactly, 100%. No, it's very well put. That's if the only thing you take away from this podcast. Build a system for creative testing. It's so valuable, especially if you're wanting to scale up your ad spend. Like, that's the number one limiter to ad spend, is being able to creative test accurately and robustly.
Yeah. And the number 2 takeaway is use Triple Whale, right?
Hey, this guy. What a mensch this guy.
Yeah, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
I'm on the Twitters, so the Bird app, at Rabah Rahil, RABAH, You can follow Triple Whale at Triple Whale. And then if you do want to get more involved with Triple Whale, it's just triplewhale.com.
Yeah, you got some spicy tweets there too, like the corporate account as well.
Yeah. The Triple Whale account's fun. That's my man Tommy. He's a fun little young gun. We like to lean into the memes and some fun stuff. We're not a boring B2B SaaS company, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely give it a follow. There's a lot of great people in the DDC Twitter community, so I always try to get people.
It is, isn't it? It's one of the better communities. There's finance Twitter that's a little cringy, but the DDC is actually pretty strong. I've had fun with it.
Sweet, man. Well, I enjoyed this podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Learn some new things as well. I hope you guys were able to learn a nugget or two, or at least write down that nugget that was given at the end. This has been another e-commerce Conversations. Cheers, and keep on growing.